Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute. Welcome to our webcast with our founder and president, Helga Zepp LaRouche. It's July 2019. There's been a lot of developments on the strategic side of things. And Helga, why don't we start with the Trump-Kim meeting in Pyongyang in North Korea? What's your assessment of this meeting?
Well, I think that is definitely going back to what I called the Singapore spirit, referring to the first summit between Trump and Kim Jong-un. And I think this is really potentially really the real thing, because as we had observed, the summit in Hanoi was sabotaged essentially by, I think, Pompeo and Bolton. But this time, I think the fact that in Osaka at the sidelines of the G20 meetings, there were these meetings between Trump and Putin, Trump and Xi Jinping, Trump and Abe, which is in the background also, and also Moon. I think that this all is back to the idea that policy is being made on the level of the presidents. And there was this summit between President Trump and Xi Jinping, but they also had a dinner about which very little is being reported. But Trump's spontaneous decision was that he would go to the DMZ zone, meet with Kim, which was sort of a surprise. Then he went earlier than even announced, and he stepped symbolically over this very important border. Now, the interesting thing about it is that, which is very unusual, that the North Korean media all instantly very broadly reported about this, calling it a historic meeting, bold and efficient, and that the two leaders will stay in personal close contact from now on. And I think this is all, really a sign that the Chickenhawks in the Trump cabinet were outflanked, and the policy is being made back by Trump. And I think especially for the viewers outside of the United States, who generally, at least in the West, only have an extremely negative picture by the media, it's really important to see this difference. When President Trump has the freedom to act, he tends to do very important things. And I think this is very, very promising. So unlike with the previous summit follow-up, this time it will not just be Pompeo who will do the follow-up, but there are supposed to be working groups, entire teams from the State Department and the North Korean ministry, and they are supposed to follow this up. Now, I think the Italian politician Michele Geraci made a very important characterization, which I tend to agree with, where he said that this event is probably the event of the year, and it may be the event of the first term of the Trump presidency. So I think there is all reason to be really optimistic, because, with Russia and China in the background, and it seems to be that also South Korean President Moon was, at least in the environment, he was seen on a video together with these two other leaders. That all means that potential for the solution of the North Korean denuclearization is shaping up on the horizon, because only if there are security guarantees for North Korea, whereby they could denuclearize and not fear that Kim Jong-un would face the same fate like Saddam Hussein and Gaddafi, which is the main reason why North Korea insisted on their nuclear program. But with Russia and China being in the picture, maybe an entire Asian security architecture which could solve the North Korea situation, can be made possible. And that is definitely, that would, if it would come together, and all signs right now speak for it, naturally with the Belt and Road Initiative, the new Silk Road as the economic dimension of this whole program. I think this is a very hopeful sign, and it would mean that one of the most dangerous crisis spots in the world strategic picture could be resolved. So I think this is very, very promising, and I think it really shows that on the level of the presidents Xi Jinping, Putin, Trump, solutions can be found. And in this case, also the Japanese government is in a supportive role. There are many Japanese and Chinese scholars who want to improve the relationship between China and Japan. Naturally, South Korea has all the interest that this problem gets resolved. So I think this shows you the incredible potential of the new Silk Road to be the inspiration for peaceful solutions and a durable peace.
Helga, you mentioned the outflanking of the Chickenhawks within the administration. It appears from the hysterical reaction of Democrats that they were also caught off guard by this meeting.
Oh, yes. I think the Democratic reaction is just absolutely, they lost it. Tim Ryan, for example, compared the meeting between Trump and Kim with the Chamberlain meeting with Hitler in Munich 38. Now that shows you that they really have fallen off the deep end, so to speak. I don't see Kim Jong-un taking over all of Asia, but it just shows you that the Democrats are really the war party. And the only very good exception in this chorus of insanity was in the first Democratic debate, where Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard spent the entire 7 minutes she had to participate in the debate to denounce the danger of nuclear war, saying it's closer than any time since the end of the Cold War. She denounced the endless regime change wars, and she also attacked Trump that he had let the conflict with Iran getting close to 10 minutes to war. So I think Tulsi Gabbard, at least on the war issue, she is a very good exception in the chorus of Democrats. And it's quite good that the population increased their support for her after this debate in the polls. So that shows you that once you have leaders who speak to the issue of war and peace, the American people are not for war. And that is a very important lesson in this presidential campaign.
Well, let's look briefly at the '20s.
I cannot hear you, Harley.
I said we should talk about the G20 summit because it was itself seemed to be a waste of time, although there were all the side summits, side meetings that were quite significant.
Yes, I think the important fact is that the meeting between Trump and Putin did take place. Remember that, at previous such summits, there were last minute sabotage actions. This did not happen. I think, the Trump Xi Jinping meeting was also very important, and naturally many other bilateral meetings, but essentially all around Trump, Putin, and Xi Jinping, while the EU was really completely irrelevant. Now, as a criticism, I must say that the G20 should have addressed the danger of a coming financial crash, and they did not do that. But that has probably to do with the fact that the G20 is not the format which is capable of addressing this issue. I think on the more positive side was a definite improvement in the relationship between the United States and China. Trump and Xi Jinping got the the trade war at least stalled so that there is room for new negotiations. The Huawei ban was lifted, at least for the time being, so that American products can be sold to Huawei. And also China agreed to import a large quantity of US agricultural products. So hopefully, that this can now get on a better track. I mean, I'm not giving the warning sign yet, but I think this was definitely a step in the right direction. So, but I said the big one that the G20 should have addressed the pending danger of a financial collapse did not take place. And that shows you that our proposal that you need a different combination, preferably the combination of Trump, Xi Jinping, Putin, and Modi to address these issues is a viable idea, because the G20 failed again to do what really would be their responsibility to the world population.
And there was a report that came out from the Bank for International Settlements, which said that we are, as a result of over-leveraged corporate debt, heading for a potential crash. What do you make of this report?
Well, that's first of all not the only voice which is warning of that, but the BIS, after all, is the so-called central bank of central banks, and they have basically reiterated, that the corporate debt crisis and their engagement in derivatives is the equivalent of what the subprime crisis was in 2008. Now that obviously has been building up for a while, and now all the data for the first and second quarter of this year show that the world economy, with very few exceptions, mainly of countries which are working with the Belt and Road Initiative, but all the European countries, most of the Asian countries, and the United States have actually all signs of a recession or zero growth. All the figures are negative. So I think we are in for a very big crisis, and our related EIR publications, or that of our colleagues in the United States, they basically just published a new study, The Bitter Truth About the Economic Recovery, referring to the supposed recovery in the United States. And we have there analyzed the different segments of the US economy, everything from collapse of infrastructure, unemployment, homeless, the drug epidemic, the negative life expectancy in the United States and the UK, one should add. So all these parameters of the physical economy show that there is no recovery. And we have warned all the time that an increase in the price of the stock market is rather an alarming sign than a real indicator of the real economy. For example, Deutsche Bank just announced or is rumored to have major layoffs, and the stocks went up significantly. So I think we are in an urgent situation where the economic package, which was designed by Mr. Lyndon LaRouche many years ago, for the four laws, Glass-Steagall, banking separation, a national bank in every country, a new credit system, a new Bretton Woods system, and the United States and Europe joining with the new Silk Road is an urgent question. So I think that we need to have a mobilization. So I'm asking you, our viewers and listeners, to help us, contact us, because this crisis is coming on fast, and it would be almost a miracle if it wouldn't take place very soon this year.
Now, one of the important developments was the meeting with Trump and Putin, coming as it did, especially after the danger that we saw last weekend, over the weekend before, over Iran. What's your assessment of where things stand now between the United States and Russia?
Well, it's not yet, a situation where one could be satisfied with, but according to the Russian Defense Ministry, there were some inspections involving what they call the New START agreement, Russian and US military talking in this context, and Russian specialists doing investigations in Turkey and in Romania, according to the OSCE document. So I think that there are clearly signs in the aftermath of the Putin-Trump meeting that a normalization could occur. There was also an agreement between Russia and NATO. They agreed on some non-escalation agreement. I mean, that is not much yet, but it means that for the time being, that there will be not an increase of troops into the east, to the borders of Russia, and no increase of equipment. So that is not yet a solution, but at least these are very tiny baby steps which show some hope, and also the fact that President Trump accepted the invitation by Putin to attend the 75th anniversary next year in Moscow, the celebration of the end of World War II, is a good sign. And also, you know, Macron, obviously, after it's not going so well for him in general, accepted such an invitation to Moscow, which is a good step in the right direction. Unlike, unfortunately, I have to say, the new head of the CDU in Germany, Annegret Kramp-Karrenbauer, or AKK as she is called, who made another one of her really mindless Cold War speeches defending the sanctions in a family entrepreneur conference in Germany. So the division line is really those people who try to get in a very dangerous strategic situation some new discussion, dialogue, rapprochement with Russia, with China and the West, and those who are in the old paradigm and are backward oriented. So I think that that is an important difference.
Well, many Americans are wanting to know what actually is going on with the European Union. They seem to play almost no role in Osaka at the G20, and they just they couldn't even elect a new leadership. Where's this headed?
Well, I think the EU is essentially finished. I mean, this organization, which basically is a large bureaucracy modeled on the principles of the British Empire, have completely moved away from the interest of their member states, of the populations they're supposedly representing. And I think it's falling apart. I mean, the fact that they couldn't agree on the successor of Juncker for EU Commission President, Manfred Weber, the candidate of Germany, was completely rejected. Macron made intrigues against him. Now, then, for a time being, the Dutch socialist or social democrat Timmerman was mooted. He was opposed by the Visegrad group and Ireland and I think Bulgaria. Naturally, then there is a wheeling and dealing, that you give that post to this one and then the other one gets this post. I mean, this is all very much without any dignity, and that becomes visible to the public eye. So they had to break off the EU summit because they couldn't find a solution at a joint leadership. Now, that, in my view, is a reflection of the fact that there is no unity in the EU, and naturally the EU policies overall are completely unfit for any of the crises which exist. So it's high time to replace the EU with something different. And again, I have to quote Michele Geraci, who also commented on the fact that the EU has completely become, superfluous and will vanish in a larger Eurasian kind of a combination. And that actually makes a lot of sense, because you already have the integration of the Belt and Road Initiative, the Eurasian Economic Union. And if European countries would start to associate with that in the context of the joint building of the new Silk Road, then all of these problems could be addressed. Just since I'm was quoting Geraci, let me just mention one other important, interesting thing he said, namely that the West has completely underestimate the rapid growth of China, and that China is now leader not only in 5G technology, Huawei, but e-cars, e-batteries, DNA mapping, quantum particles. One could add fast train systems, fusion research, moon landing. So I think China is on a very good trajectory, and countries who really want to solve their problems should cooperate. Xi Jinping offered again at the G20 in his speech that the BRI is an open concept for international cooperation. And I think the countries of the West would be well advised to take up this offer.
Well, one exception to the dysfunction of the European Union seems to be Italy. And there's a very significant statement issued by prominent Italian scientists attacking this climate hoax. What do you know about that, Helga?
Is very important. This is a group of extremely well-known and prestigious scientists who made an appeal to the Italian president, the Italian government, and the parliament not to adopt policies of reducing CO2 emissions with the argument that CO2 is not a pollutant, that to the contrary, CO2 is extremely important for life on the planet, and that in any case, all of these claims about control of the climate by reducing the CO2 emissions is a complete hoax, that there is not one single fact for that, and that in science, facts cannot be replaced by a number of people who claim to say one opinion. And basically that all of these predictions are based on computer simulation models and not on any true physical science. So I think this is very important. There were about 70 original signers, and then one first signer who is very famous, Professor Antonino Sikiki, who is a professor. He's very known. He was the leader for many decades of the famous Erice Center in Sicily. And, I think that this is something which will deserves support by many people in other countries as well. So we are planning to publish this appeal. And actually, if people are interested to have an honest debate, they should sign this appeal so that, reason is being brought back into this debate. They also note in this resolution, by the way, that the consensus among the scientists on this issue does not exist at all, but that there is a growing number and large number of scientists who are absolutely opposing it and opposing the findings of these models, and naturally also say it's a complete illusion to think that you can control climate by CO2 reduction. Climate change is obviously taking place, but it's almost a fakery to claim that you can influence the climate by such measures, because it's not anthropogenic. It has to do with quite different phenomena in our Milky Way, in the galaxy, on the sun, all things which man cannot influence as such. Now, talking about fakery, just to mention that we probably will pick this up in the next program next week. A group of journalists has just documented that the OPCW completely faked their report on the supposed attack with chemical weapons on Douma in Syria, and that the initial report, which the OPCW had, actually said that it was a staged event. So this is all now coming out, and the role of the British in that fakery as well. But that we will deal with more next week.
Well, we are coming up to a moment where the British Empire is increasingly exposed as not just corrupt, but the continuing dominant force in the old paradigm. This week is the week of July 4th, the founding of the American Republic. How should people think about this situation by reflecting on both what the founding fathers did and the upgrading of the American revolutionary ideal done by your husband, Lyndon LaRouche?
Well, I think the July 4th celebration is not just for barbecues, but people should remember the proud history of the American War of Independence against the British Empire, the Declaration of Independence and the principles declared there. The idea of Benjamin Franklin, of Alexander Hamilton, and the founding fathers in general, to declare a republic, to give the United States a constitution devoted to the common good, not only of the present generation, but of posterity, is an extremely important inflection point in all of human history. And, if the United States could go back and, with the present policies of Trump, at least in the first steps, there is the hope that America can become a republic again. Now, I've said this many times, if the United States would remind itself of its ideals, of its origins, and actually start to implement that and go away from being the junior partner of the British Empire, then America would have all the friends in the world. And, this is the crucial step which will decide over world war or world peace. So I hope that people on this 4th of July reflect on that and make a step in this direction, especially because shortly after the 4th of July will be the 50 years celebration of the Apollo landing. There will be many events, and the Schiller Institute will also have major events on that date, especially focusing not on the last 50 years, but on the next 50 years, and what kinds of economic crash programs are needed to make possible what President Trump had promised when he said that by 2024, there will be again a man, and this time hopefully also a woman, on the moon. But that requires to go into the kind of economic crash mobilization as it was defined by the 4 laws of Lyndon LaRouche, and is actually the absolute mandate to be implemented in the near future. So I think that we have an incredibly, what Schiller would call, pregnant moment in history. I think a great catastrophe has been barely avoided, with the, situation with Iran. Now with talks again between the US and China and Russia, there is actually hope, but that is just the first baby step. And we need the full new paradigm, a new system of international relations, and especially a new economic system based on the physical principles developed by Lyndon LaRouche. So therefore, I can only appeal to you, as I have done in the past, help us with the exoneration campaign for my husband, sign the petition, and please take the time to watch the 2 videos of the memorial of Lyndon LaRouche and the fact or the case of Lyndon LaRouche, which describes exactly what was done and why it is so absolutely crucial to exonerate him, to make the way free for his solutions. So please watch these 2 videos, help us to circulate them as widely as possible, and join the Schiller Institute.
Well, Helga, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you maybe even later this week as events are happening so rapidly. Thank you.
Yes, till soon.